day after the retrieval operations were concluded in Stilfontein in the northwest, let's look at what does it take to shut down a mine shaft, but also the difference that mining makes in any community. The last tally, for example, shows that there are more than 6,000 derelict and ownerless mines in the country. So what strategy must be put in place to tackle this challenge and more? We're speaking to Dr. Adwoa Boaduo, who's a mining engineer. She's no stranger to the show. Thank you so much for coming in. Let's just start with, for example, we often hear that a shaft is to be closed, shut down. How does it all happen? What does this mean?
So, Bongiwe, closing a mine or decommissioning a mine is a very complex issue. It's complex, it's multifaceted, it requires a multiple stakeholder approach. So what happens is that these days it's incorporated into our mining legislation, into our MPRDA, and there are also a lot of best practices. The ICMM has a best practice on how you close a mine. So one of the important things is you make provision for mine closure when you are planning your mine. In a value chain, in a mining value chain, you start with your reconnaissance, you go into exploration, so on and so forth. So when you do the mine planning, you factor in the issue of mine closure and rehabilitation in the budget. And then when you commission the mine or you start the mine, you move for maybe a certain number of years, and then you incorporate the closure. So we call it progressive closure. So you trial some things that would be required in mine closure while you are mining.
So it doesn't take anybody by surprise. It's something you must do as you are working.
Now, yes, after the enactment of mine closure, which is, it got properly instilled in the South African mining legislation in the 2000s, first mentioned in about 1991. But you've still got some of our mines that don't really adhere now, but we are mainly facing the problem of those mines that shut down before the legislation became enacted, before, let's say, 1991 or into 91, 92. So those are the mines that I think are giving us quite a bit of headache now, those 6,000 ownerless derelict mines.
And I was going to ask that question. I'm glad you went there, because now does it mean, especially when you look at those mines, because we listen to the government talking about how much of a process is involved here when you have to shut them down. How much is involved? For example, if you can just say a rough estimate when it comes to closing down a mine, is it that expensive?
It's expensive. I can't really put a figure to it because each mine is unique. So one of the challenges with the current closure legislation is it takes a blanket approach. No two mines are the same. The way you close Bongiwe's mine and the way you close Adwoa's mine is not going to be the same. So the costs differ. And that's one of the challenges we find, that right now we have almost like a one shoe fits all, one size fits all approach. But each mine is unique, so it's difficult to say that this. If you've got an open cast mine, the cost will be different from a deep level underground mine. To close a gold mine is different from closing a coal mine. So it varies, it really varies.
And when we speak about some of these shafts that end up seeing, people going down to try and mine for whatever they can, it speaks to the face of a community and how it gets changed when a mine comes into that community, and how some people expect this relationship, for example, to go on forever, I suppose.
So in my master's research, I talk about the different types of mining towns you get. You get specialized mining towns that depend solely on mining activity. And then you get trade mining towns. So mining has a value chain. You start by extracting, and then you refine and you sell. So the problem is we get these specialized mining towns who depend on mining and the primary extraction. And they do not really participate in activities that are higher in the value chain. No value addition. So when the mines close down, because our ore bodies have got a finite life, when they close down, there's no plan to decouple the specialized mining town from the mining activity. Sometimes we don't incorporate the SLPs, the social labor plans, the corporate social responsibility. We don't incorporate it well into local economic development. So then we struggle to decouple the town from the mining activity. And then the economy goes down, and then you end up with ghost mining towns. So that's one of the challenges that, yeah.
And you know what you're describing is a picture that unfolds in a number of these mining towns, because they raise the issue of the SLP right at the end. And when you look at this now, you find people who are saying, then create some kind of opportunities for us, because this is all we know.
Yeah. So when you read the ICMM guideline for mine closure, it says that when you, in your closure planning, you have to sort of like trial your mine closure, the activity, the new economic activity that you want to transition into. You do micro experiments, and you also trial the ways, the tools you use to measure it. So if you say, for example, in this mining town, we're going to build a big farm afterwards. So while you're still mining, you start that small farming project, and then you look at how, in like 2 ways in which is it working? How do we measure its success? So I think the accountability also lies with the mining companies, not just the government. For them to just comply to ethics and leave essentially the place better than the way they found it. So yeah,
and especially because, you know, now listening to what you have to say, I mean, it's new information for me, and it's interesting because if then you are to explore whatever it is you want to do afterwards, you are still taking the community with you, because they're going to get involved, and thus then kind of like maybe limiting the fallout, if I can put it that way, that we often see when a mine has shut down and has left, and people are saying, we're left with no jobs, we didn't know what is happening. So if you put that in place, all these systems, as you say, it's going to minimize that.
Yes, in theory it should. But you know, we deal with, it's very difficult. There's no one blanket, there's no one exact solution. It's a very complex problem. It requires a lot of understanding. But you're right. If you engage your community well throughout, they should, you know, and you do things that really benefit them. We see a lot of mining companies, and you know, they've built schools. They've done really, really well, and they've really uplifted the economy and the communities. But then the real test comes when that mine reaches end of life. What they've brought into place, will it be sustainable?
Sure.
Yeah.
And tell me, if let's say a shaft is closed or a mine is closed and they've closed down, and then they're trying to seal the shaft, can it still be reopened, or is it done in such a way that no one can go back there?
Well, I think we've seen that it can be reopened, because we've got several cases where not small-scale miners, there's a difference between illegal mining and small-scale mining. Illegal miners have gone and blasted the seals. They can access explosives, you see. But I think the problem now is we don't understand how they are doing most of these things. And I think that's where we are at the back foot. Because in the unfortunate crisis at Stilfontein, I wonder if they actually took these illegal miners, sat down with some of them and asked them, how is this operating? Because we are really behind in terms of knowledge. How did they know where to access the ore? They know where high-grade ore is. They know how to get it out. They know the illegal mining value chain better than we do. So that puts us at a back foot. How do you solve a problem that you don't even understand?
I suppose then, does it speak to some of what is being said, that maybe some of them were working in some of these mines, and not only in Stilfontein, that they're working in some of these mines and definitely would know, after being retrenched or let go of, they would know how intricate these operations are and where things and how things work?
Most certainly. And we have a challenge with some of the mining companies where you know, okay, let's start with the ones that were working there. We know that the gold mining industry used to employ 200,000 people in the early 2000s, and now we're down to 93,000. That 100 and something thousand displaced labor, miners, you know, the ones that are no longer around, they shifted onto something, so they know the places, And some of them maybe have insider knowledge from some people who work in, we don't know, and you cannot really diagnose the problem. The simple solution is to ask them, how did you get here? How did you get the information? How does the value chain work? Who are you supplying? Because for them to be producing, there is a demand. The minister said we are losing about 60 billion rand in revenue. Who is the client? How does we don't understand the value chain. We don't understand the problem well. We cannot quantify it. we can't even say how much of this there is. So,
and the fact that, as you say, if you don't understand a problem, how do you then resolve it?
Exactly.
It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming in and just really schooling us on a lot of this stuff. I appreciate your time. That is Dr. Adwoa Boaduo, a mining engineer. I'm sure you have learned as much as I have as well on what does it take to really just close down the shaft. So certainly a fascinating conversation there.